Everybody. Well, welcome again to the Powerful People series. And today we have Dr. Daniel Corcos, who is a wealth of information on exercise and Parkinson's. He's probably done more research than anybody you could possibly know on that front. So Daniel's at Northwestern, my alma mater, so happy to have you. And we want to hear all about the studies you're doing, the research you've done, and your feelings about exercise. So we're going to kick this off. And I thought we'd just start off by talking, maybe just letting the audience know, what has led you to be interested in Parkinson's and exercise and the research that you've embarked on.
I was very fortunate in 1994 to 1995. I went on a sabbatical to Queen Square in England. It's the Institute of Neurology, and many famous people have trained there, and they're really quite outstanding at Parkinson's. So I spent a year there conducting research, and I was very interested in answering the question, are people with Parkinson's disease weak, or are they not weak? At the time, they were thought not to be weak. And so we studied a group of people with Parkinson's disease, and we took them off their levodopa medication, and lo and behold, when they were withdrawn from medication, they became noticeably weak. And this article was published in Annals of Neurology in 1996. And the one thing if you've only been off medication for 12 hours, the weakness is due to an inability to drive muscles. It is not due to becoming weak over time, becoming out of shape, because you take a person off medication and then 18 hours or 12 hours later, you test them and they're weak. Then many years later, I designed an NIH-funded study to look at the effect of strength training on people with Parkinson's disease, and a whole series of papers were published. The first in 2013 showed that resistance training, that is doing weight training, is very beneficial for the signs and symptoms of Parkinson's disease. We then took the same data set, and in 2015, we showed that people's cognition was improved. And we also published an article showing improvements in gait locomotion. And so I have these three publications showing clear evidence that strength training is beneficial. And there have been many meta-analyses showing the same thing. So a meta-analysis is when scientists pull the data from many studies, and they ask the question, is there a common finding which comes through all the studies? And meta-analyses have also shown resistance training is very good. Resistance training is only part of what all of us should be doing. Another part of what we should all be doing is working our heart, the cardiovascular, cardiorespiratory system. And so in 2012, I started to work with my colleagues on an intervention study for endurance training, and we published that paper in 2018 in JAMA Neurology, and we showed quite clearly that there are noticeable benefits for exercising at a high heart rate 4 times a week for 30 minutes. The idea here is that there's some evidence that the rate at which the disease progresses may slow if you are doing endurance exercise. And so that essentially is, in a nutshell, my work on exercise in Parkinson's disease.
And that is, so let's expand on that a little bit and kind of go back to your first study where you were looking at the progressive resistance exercise. And with that, what type of exercises would you say, what were you looking at in that particular study?
Well, we were using exercises which involve all the major muscle groups of the body. In that particular paper, we used 11 exercises, and you can find the exercises listed in the 2013 paper in movement disorders. But essentially, you want to exercise all your major muscle groups. So you've got major muscle groups in the arms, got major muscle groups in the back, you have the core, then you have your leg muscles, you've certainly got calf muscles, quadriceps muscles, and you've also got hamstring muscles. Some people think you can get this down to 5 exercises, which incorporate activity for all the major muscle groups. The key point really is that you exercise all the major muscle groups. People with Parkinson's disease tend to assume a flexed posture over time. And so there is a significant benefit to making sure that you exercise your extensor muscles in particular. If you've never done weight training before, if this is all very, very new to you and you don't know where to begin, there are health facilities which one can go to and find a personal trainer. There's lots of available information on the internet, lots of information for people with Parkinson's disease. But that essentially is what people should be doing. And this is true for everybody. It's not just for people with Parkinson's disease. I think people find it very difficult to understand how beneficial resistance training is. But it is massively beneficial, especially certainly if one has osteoporosis. It is almost a must because you want to do everything you can to protect bone integrity, because people with Parkinson's disease have at least twice the probability of falling than people without. So if you have a tendency to fall, and Parkinson's disease individuals do, and if you have osteoporosis, it's not a good combination. So anything you can do to significantly strengthen your muscle and also at the same time increase bone density is pretty much a no-brainer.
Yeah, well, I think that that particular study, I mean, all of your studies have been so helpful for the development of all the fitness opportunities that have surfaced, over the years. And I know when we started just reading your article, and now we're in our 10th year in operation, and I think that contributed to a lot of the development of our program and the ongoing research. So yeah, I think there's so many different ways that people can get that resistance training and the strength training. And it's interesting that you found that people cognitively improved as well with that type of training.
Yes. So if you look at cross diseases, you look at across interventions, resistance training is particularly good for cognition. So the 2013 paper clearly showed improvements in 3 measures of cognition. I have a 2016 paper with colleagues from Brazil where we added an extra part to the resistance training, and that is people did resistance training on devices which weren't stable. So if you go into a physical therapy program, you'll see people use what are called Bosu balls and many other devices that you can sit on, stand on, and these give a certain instability, and the instability then requires the brain to work very hard to control your balance because it has to process all the information coming in from the sensory systems. So when you do resistance training in an unstable environment, you get a very, very good improvement in cognition. And this is a very robust finding. For many people, it's hard to understand because you associate resistance training with developing muscle or tone, to muscle or shape to muscle. But remember that when a muscle contracts, a part of the brain is causing to the muscle to contract. And so you're in parallel exercising the brain at the same time as the muscle. And the evidence is crystal clear that it's very good for you.
Yeah, well, I love that because I think that helps with multitasking, and just that whole concept is so important. So, so you're working on balance. You have to think about multiple things at the same time, and I think that that's really important. Which I know we again work on a lot of those different things. Always keeping those different aspects in mind. I
just want to double check something with you.
Yeah.
All of your audience knows that you are a physician, correct? Or at least you were a physician.
Yes, I believe. Well, I don't know if everybody knows that, but yes.
Well, I just wanted to remind everybody, because if I say anything, especially about things like osteoporosis, which are completely out to lunch, I'm sure you'll correct me very quickly.
Sure, I will, but I know you know what you're talking about. So, and people can certainly ask questions here, and I'll put my name on here so that we know who I am.
And actually, it would be very good for people to ask questions. So for those of you listening, send in your questions, and between the two of us, we will give you an answer. Yes,
absolutely. So I wanted to ask you, so your article on the high intensity treadmill exercise, that was a top article, I think, in 2017. And the benefits of high intensity exercise. Can you, I know you already mentioned, the effects and how important it is for people, but what, and I know now you're on maybe we could talk about the different phases of your study and what you're looking at, like what does high intensity mean, or what is it that people should be getting with their exercise?
Well, before I talk about that, I want to make a few points which sometimes get a little bit lost. I'm sure I'm talking to people of very different ages, whose disease is at different levels of severity, etc., etc. So the first point I want to make crystal clear is that no two people are the same. The second point I want to make really clear is that all forms of exercise are good for one. So when I talk about different kinds of exercise, you find that it's perhaps not your cup of tea. Well, the solution is not to just decide, I'm not going to do anything, okay? The solution is to find something that works for you. Could be gardening, could be walking, could be swimming. It could be anything which can be called activity. And so the single most important point to take away from today is to increase your activity level. Now, I'm a scientist, I'm a professor at Northwestern, and my job is to try to provide the evidence for the absolute best form of exercise that a person can do if they are willing to do it. I am very much aware that not everybody is willing to do it. And at the end of the day, all of us, myself included, all of you have to decide what is best for you. And when I tell you next, the evidence is crystal clear, okay? The real trouble many people have is doing it. And, we'll talk about that later on. Now, it turns out that when I came into work this morning, I was listening to NPR. Back in 2013, it was clear the life expectancy in the US was noticeably less than many other countries. It's getting worse now. And a lot of the lifestyle of many of us in America is not good. And the evidence for that is just overwhelming. Now, one of the things I've learned from talking to many of my friends who have Parkinson's disease, I Zoom with up to 60 a month, is that they've decided to exercise. Many of them try to do what the literature tells them, and they look great, and they're doing well. They have a disease, there's no question about that, but they have a health and a lifestyle which is every bit as good as many people who don't have a disease. And so I want to encourage you to do what you can. Now, I'm going to walk you through my, it was actually published in 2018 in JAMA Neurology. This paper, if you can find it, received a lot of publicity, and it is well known around the world. And it shows that if you can get your heart rate up to about 80 to 85% for 30 minutes, 4 times a week, that your disease progresses at a slower rate. Now, that study was designed to make sure it was safe and feasible. Now, we did have the data to suggest that it would slow disease progression, but it wasn't definitive. So a phase 2 clinical trial is never definitive. That study was primarily designed to show that it was feasible and safe, and that there was enough efficacy, which means effectiveness, to do a much larger study. We now have a study across 25 sites in America, where we recruit people who are within 3 years of disease diagnosis, who have not yet started dopaminergic medication. We do this because now we can study the effect of exercise on the disease without any confound of the beneficial effects of the medication. And we will finish in August of 2027, we hope, and we'll have the results quite quickly after that. And so we will randomly assign 185 people to one treatment arm and 185 to the other. Both treatment arms are very good. Okay, so for those of you who find high intensity just not your cup of tea, walking at a moderate intensity is still very good for you. It's just the evidence at the moment suggests it may not be quite as good, but it is still very, very good for you and much better than 24 hours a day on the couch.
Absolutely. Well, I think, how do you feel that once you gain this information, how do you feel this will translate to providers and to the Parkinson's community? How can we convey that information and use that data in a real way, in a daily way?
Well, the Parkinson's community has wonderful groups. So, so there's certainly this group. And if you go and look at Dr. Mosier's website and you look at all the activities there, there's enough to keep one from getting bored for the rest of one's life. They cover the gamut, and they are very, very good for you, and the evidence is crystal clear. There's some wonderful activities for people who have posture balance control. You can do a lot sitting. If anybody doesn't believe you can do a lot sitting, I've just come back from giving grand rounds in New York. I went to Broadway. You look at dance routines involving chairs, you can do quite a workout if you're just sitting. So the bottom line is there's a wonderful set of programs that one can do at home. And for many people, there are advantages. For many other people, going out to a rock steady boxing class adds a social component, which is very motivating. You may not feel like going out, but hopefully your friends will very politely and nicely tell you how much they missed you when you don't show up, and that the next time they have talked you into going, may not even be for yourself. It may be for their benefit, because one way to talk oneself into exercising as one ages is the better what shape one's in, the less of a liability one is to everybody. So if you are looking after yourself, you are less of a liability to yourself, you are less of a liability to your spouse, you're less of a liability to your friends and family, and you're less of a liability to society. And this point has been articulated very clearly in the World Health Organization 2015 to 2030 document. And there's an element of self and social responsibility here. So one of the tricks that I play with my own mind is finding different ways to motivate myself to stay in the best shape that I can. Now, there are 4 or 5 wonderful, in America, they're also around the world, Parkinson foundations or philanthropic groups. The Parkinson Foundation is great. The David Spinney Foundation is great. The Michael J. Fox Foundation is great. The American Parkinson's Disease Association is great. And so if you look on their web pages, you'll find also a great deal of information that can help you and that can motivate you and that can encourage you. Now, there are programs in some states for people, programs like Silver Sneakers. I am cautiously optimistic that over time, as the word continues to get out, that insurance companies, Medicare, other providers will get more and more behind prevention. Now, every 6 minutes, somebody in America is diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Every 6 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. And that is a very sobering statistic. And it is related to considerable expense. So you can look at the expense. And as people start to integrate or to sum the expense over time, they will draw the conclusion that those who look after themselves at the end of the day cost society less money. And therefore there should be reimbursable ways to help people offset the cost, because not everybody is fortunate enough to be able to afford to go to a gym or a personal trainer. I, for one, would be very happy to see people given a treadmill, for example, or a bike. They're not that expensive if you consider how much money they could save on trips to physicians, etc. I'm optimistic over time that America will realize that it cannot go on the same way that it's gone on previously. It's just going to be too expensive.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. I mean, I think it's great for everyone. I think the bottom line is what you said earlier is that people find a way to stay active and do something really every day. And so there's a whole variety of programs that have surfaced in a lot of areas throughout the world, really. We have the in-person classes here, and I know how much that means to people, and that you can actually, you have to be held accountable to someone. So we really miss, we know if someone doesn't show up to class. So I think if you have that ability to get into a setting like that is wonderful. Of course, we think Power for Parkinson's. We're here for those people that might not have that opportunity to be in a group setting, or, on the days that you can't get out, to be here for people, which we also, chat with people. So we try to have that social interaction if possible. But I think it's good to encourage people to be in a social setting where you can be accountable, be safe, and when you're exercising. And just finding the things that people love. But I wanted to ask you about your, when you're doing your study, like I guess there are a couple things, but one, I noticed when I was looking at this that you're also checking, evaluating biomarkers for the people in the phase 3 study.
We are evaluating.
And I was curious, what biomarkers you're looking at and how you determine that.
Well, just so everybody understands what we are referring to. So biomarker is a very general term for any measurement one can make which may respond to your intervention. So if one is doing a drug, one may have a change in one's Parkinsonism. One's doing exercise, one may have a change. And there are many, many biomarkers one can use to quantify change as a result of an intervention. One can also use biomarkers for other reasons. So biomarkers are sometimes used to differentiate disease. So this would be a diagnostic biomarker. So when you're diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, most of you would have been diagnosed by a physician. The physician will have done a very detailed history, asked you lots of questions, and then on that visit or a subsequent visit tell you that you probably have Parkinson's disease. Diagnosis is never certain. They may send you for what is called a DAT scan, and a DAT scan tests for how much dopamine you have in your brain, and if you have less than a certain amount, so that would be a diagnostic biomarker. And we use that scan in our study. Everybody in our study is scanned, so we maximize the likelihood of people in our study having Parkinson's disease. It doesn't rule it out. Somebody could still have a variant, or they could have essential tremor. But that's one way in which you use a biomarker. We also draw blood from people, and then we can look at many characteristics of blood. One characteristic of blood is called neurofilament light chain, and that's also being used as a diagnostic biomarker. So at the end of our study, we will look at something like neurofilament light chain and just make sure that we really do have a pool of people who have Parkinson's disease.
Mhm.
Because we collect because we collect blood, we can also ask the question, is there excessive inflammation in Parkinson's disease? And there is. We can then ask the question, does inflammation get reduced by exercise? And it should. And so one of the real benefits of exercise is not just that it may modify the signs and symptoms of Parkinson's disease, and it may improve cognition, but at a different level, it is improving aspects of blood chemistry. So I have a very good friend, and hope he's listening today. He's in Florida, zooms every month, pays great attention to his exercise, great attention to his diet. I asked him what his CRP was, C-reactive protein. He just had it tested recently. It was for 1. Now, I'm sure most of you listening have no idea what 1 means, but I'm sure Dr. Mosier can tell you that if she had a CRP of 1, she would be very happy. It's a very good value to have. And so there are many other measures of inflammation that we'll be looking at, because Parkinson's disease has been associated with inflammation. If you're looking at the blood, there's also a trophic factor that you'll read lots about, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It's reduced in Parkinson's disease, and we're interested to know whether it's increased. That is still an open question. Then there are 2 wonderful hormones that we're very interested in, not in SPARK3 because we can't look at both of them, but in general. So one of the hormones we're interested in is cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone. It's linked to cognition. If your cortisol is high, it's not good. It means you're experiencing too much stress related to impaired cognition. We've shown endurance exercise reduces cortisol, which is very good. The other thing we're very interested in are anti-aging hormones. It's a wonderful hormone recently described and discussed in great detail called Clotho. Clotho is linked in animal models to accelerate to greater lifespan. And one of the things you find when you look at lifespan, you go to big cities and people who are poor have very much a restricted lifespan. So anything we can do in terms of exercise to help, and clotho is an anti-aging hormone, and we are moderately confident that that will increase, and we'll be looking at that very closely. So our biomarkers are the DAT scan, which allows us to look at dopamine transporter, 40 to 45 measures of blood, where we can look at inflammation, trophic factors, a variety of hormones, including vitamin D, which is very important. Then we have a really great gait core. We can look at 100 different gait measures, because gait is problematic in Parkinson's disease, especially as the disease progresses. The inability to turn is a big problem. The presence of freezing of gait is a big problem. And we're going to have nice measures for all of those. The other thing that we're doing, these are also biomarkers of a different kind. We'll be looking at activity during the day. So one of our questions is, okay, you go and exercise. One possibility is you become fitter, you become more active, you exercise more. Another possibility is you go exercise and you head to the couch. The idea being you've only got so much energy to burn in a day, you've gone and burned it in the gym, now you need to recover. So we have a variety of measures that we are taking in SPARKS3, and it'll be very, very comprehensive.
Well, it sounds very detailed, and it sounds like you'll have so much information. I can't wait to see what you come up with in another year, 2 years.
These papers will be coming out in about 2028. So we're not going to finish studies until 2027, but we're doing studies in the meantime, and I can keep you abreast on what other research is going on.
Yeah. So I think, so by talking about these, the different blood studies that you're doing, I think somebody just asked a question, and I think it would be good to clarify this, and I'll have you address this, but that basically, you know, are there currently blood tests that will monitor how, you know, the progression of Parkinson's? And
no, so there is no simple blood test. Now, whoever mentioned the progression was exactly correct. So biomarkers observe many categories, one of which is progression, and there are no blood-derived biomarkers which monitor the progression. Now, it is the case that people with Parkinson's disease tend to have elevated levels of CRP, C-reactive protein. It is the case it responds to exercise. And if one really is curious, it might be good to have that measured the next time one has a blood test. If your physician will do that for you, they may not be able to. A lot of times the research is a little bit ahead of where current clinical practice is, but one can always ask. I happen to have C-reactive protein measured a couple of years ago for another reason, and it was comforting to know that it was low. And so this is not related directly to Parkinson's disease. It's an index of inflammation, but if one's index of inflammation is low, that can only be a good thing. Yeah,
but I guess the answer, Sadhu, is that, you know, currently there are no specific biomarkers or indicators, blood indicators for Parkinson's, but there are a whole host of other researchers that are working on that. And we hope that one day we do have that, one or more biomarkers, because it would be extremely helpful for people, for physicians and monitoring people and treating people with their disease. So it's a great question.
To be crystal clear, it is a very, very active field of research.
Yes.
Everybody in Parkinson's disease wants a robust biomarker, whether it is for diagnosis, whether it is for prognosis, how well one will do over time, whether it is to differentiate treatment arms in a study. Those are all very, very good reasons for wanting biomarkers. And when you look at other diseases, it's probably fair to say that the diseases which have made the most progress to helping people are the diseases which have a clear biomarker. That is a measure that relates to the underlying biology. One good area for those of you who are just basically interested in learning more about disease and how treatments are developed, etc. The study of MS is possibly a little bit further along than Parkinson's disease in some respects in terms of disease-modifying therapies. And one argument is because they have a biomarker, one or more, which is proven very elusive for Parkinson's disease. But for those listening, you can be 100% assured that there's a very, very, very vigorous pursuit of biomarkers in Parkinson's disease.
Yes, and let's hope that somebody figures something out sooner than later. But I think we're on the right path, or not. So maybe next time we talk, there will be one.
Well,
or in a few years. In a few years.
I was
That's a little ambitious.
I do hope we talk in the relatively near future, and my optimism in the relatively near future. I'm cautiously optimistic, and the amount of work is going on, but they will come. They will come.
Yes, I believe it. So let's see. Wait, we have another question that came in. Steve asked about using. I think he means resistance bands versus using free weights. Could you get the required resistance training? And I think
the answer here is absolutely yes, because one of the very important things for people to realize that when you're in my position talking now, okay, I don't know if I'm talking to somebody who's just been diagnosed, who's in their late 40s, who has worked out all of their life and who has one expectation, or somebody in their middle 80s who was diagnosed in their early 80s. Now, therabands, resistance bands, etc. are great. They have multi-colors, so you can have different resistances. And the really nice thing about them is, well, let me ask Nina, let me ask you a question. What percentage of the people who you help are in wheelchairs?
A small percentage, 1% or less.
Oh, okay. Well, there's no question that people in Parkinson's disease may end up in a wheelchair. So it wouldn't surprise me. Now, you know, one possibility, I'll be very careful how I phrase this next. I do talk to quite a few groups, and I've learned that the people I talk to are the people who don't need to listen to me because they probably know nearly everything I've said. So for many of them, probably heard it all before and I've said nothing new. And the people I really need to reach are those that I haven't figured out how to reach. But for those of you who go into the community, for those of you who see people, the Davis Finney program has an ambassador program, which I think is really, really great. And so you have people in different states reaching out into the community. In some states, they will take into a PCP and into a doctor's clinic lots and lots of information about Parkinson's disease. So for those of you who are in the position to help inform those who are less well informed, yes, people do end up in a wheelchair. Yes, you can do bands in a wheelchair. Yes, you can link a band to one hand and your foot, and you can plantarflex and dorsiflex. And so they are absolutely great. So they get thumbs up. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The most important thing to do is one needs to adapt to one's situation. One needs to adapt to one's surroundings. One needs to adapt to how the disease is affecting one. There may come a point that it's harder to get out. In cities like Chicago, it's much easier to get out in July than it is in January. And so you may have a home-based program for the winter in which you don't have access to the larger weights, and that would be absolutely terrific.
Yeah. Well, I think just the people, I mean, it's hard. Obviously, we have people who have been joining us from all over the world, so we don't always know who everybody is, but we know we have a very active community and people that are very dedicated to exercising on a regular basis. And Power for Parkinson's aims to help people at any level. So whether they have balance issues or have trouble standing for a prolonged period of time, they can do our exercises seated. They can do them standing if they choose to. And we try to offer modifications for everybody with that. So, we have the whole gamut on, and could be on with us today. And, in our classes, we've seen some people who are in a wheelchair. They still can do a lot of the exercises, and we see people come in with a walker or with using a cane, and they end up, after a month of sessions, they don't need those anymore, or much less frequently, because they improve their strength and their balance and their coordination, and get a lot stronger. So it's very interesting. And as you know, with Parkinson's, it's so variable also, depending on the time of day, medication, and other confounding factors that can impact somebody in their ability to exercise. So yes, we have a whole gamut of people, I believe, that are on with us today. But I think most people who follow Power for Parkinson's do have an interest in fitness and staying as active as they can, help manage their disease. So reaching the other people and people that don't like to exercise is tricky. But the more people hear about how impactful it can be, I think that's all we can do.
That is right. That's all we can do. But also, I think it's a question of leading by example. So I think when people see people who have a disease, but who are doing pretty well, I think that in itself is motivating and empowering. I certainly go to a gym. I've got a good friend. He shows up all the time. He has Parkinson's disease, and I would bet quite a bit of money that most people have absolutely no idea.
Yes. And there's certainly people, that can participate anywhere.
Absolutely.
Let's see, it looks like somebody asked a question, Annie from New Jersey. I don't know if this is in your wheelhouse, but they're asking about music therapy and how beneficial that could be for somebody with Parkinson's.
Music therapy is terrific. So probably one of the leading practitioners is Dr. Elizabeth Stegemola at Iowa State University, and you can look her up. It's very, very helpful. And you can view music in several ways, one of which is just an activity. And when you see people with Parkinson's disease sing, they look great, they're animated, I think I've heard of a choir of 100 people with Parkinson's disease. So the singing part in and of itself is great. The idea of using sound or singing to help people who are freezing or have difficulty moving is well known. Sousa marches are pretty good. So the question came in from New Jersey. Well, I love New Jersey. I was very close to New Jersey at the weekend, and I was out with my cousin.
Oh, nice.
My cousin actually has a good voice. And
very nice.
His mother, my aunt, had Parkinson's disease. And when she was freezing or having any difficulty, he would just sing to her the opening bars from the Blue Danube. And off she went, walking quite well. So what you learn about the disease is you have to get creative in finding ways to finesse the disease, and the disease can be finessed. And so music is terrific in summary, whether you use it to sing, to feel better. And by the way, that also helps what is called hypokinetic dysarthria, which is a feature. Yeah. So the Parkinson's disease has a motor component to it. And what I'm doing now is talking, and that is activating my motor system, and people do get a little bit quieter. So anything you can do to sing is great. And also using singing whilst you're exercising, or music for exercising. And for those of you who have partners or people with the disease, if you've got a good voice, I asked my cousin Willie to send me a one-minute video. Had I had it by now, I would play it for you, but it will be him singing the opening bars of the Blue Danube, and I think you'll find that's a good way to overcome freezing.
Yeah, well, I think I agree with you, and I think music is transformative for so many people and in so many ways, and just really helps people their voices and overcome some of the soft, the quietness, and a great way to exercise. And we try to incorporate that in our move and shout class. We have a vocal strength class, which is singing and also lots of vocal exercises. So music should be used as much as you can add it into your life.
I actually love that word, transformative. So absolutely. So you should get as much music into your life as possible.
Yes. So I have one question I just want to bring up, and I know we only have about just a little time left, but I wanted to just bring something up again in case people are looking at your study and you're talking about the high intensity versus a moderate intensity exercise. And I know I was on another talk where Dr. Blum mentioned, how for people with Parkinson's, their heart rate will not necessarily go up like everybody else's. If you only monitor heart rate because of the autonomic dysfunction, what would you say a gauge would be for somebody to say, okay, I'm working at a moderate level versus high intensity for an individual? Can you put that in personal terms, I guess, relatable terms?
Yes. So, in terms of the autonomic dysfunction, yes, there is autonomic dysfunction. That's true. People with Parkinson's disease can certainly increase their heart rate with task demands. That is also a fact, okay? If you happen to be measuring your heart rate, for those of you who actually measure it with a device, and if you happen to know that there are formulae and you find your heart rate is well below the formulae, that is also shown in a small number of people with Parkinson's disease. But to answer your question, the easiest way to think about it is as follows. So you just imagine that Nina and I are on treadmills next to each other. With moderate intensity, we could have done this interview. We could get our heart rate up to 65% of whatever our maximal is. And certainly if you've got an attenuated heart rate, 65% of 100 would just be 65 beats. If your heart rate's 150, it'll be closer to 100. But Nina and I could converse about this and anything else we happen to want to. You're getting closer to a vigorous intensity, or 80 to 85%. That's the point when you're not conversing. At that point, Nina would be looking at the front. She would be watching her walking. She's making sure she doesn't trip, and the breathing would start to be increasing. And there are ways to score that oneself. It's called rate of perceived exertion. So imagine you have a scale of 0 to 10. When you're at 7 or 8, that's when you're working out quite vigorously. You can't keep 10 going for 30 minutes. 10 is when you're kind of sprinting, or you're going as hard as you can, and that you can only do for a small length of time. But if you're trying at the level of 7 or 8, that means you're at a vigorous exercise. If you're at 3 or 4, it's moderate. If you can have a wonderful conversation, you're doing fine. And when the conversation stops, that means your heart rate and your lungs are working quite hard.
Okay, that's great. That's a great description, I think, for people to think about as they're exercising. And we have added a lot more, higher intensity and forced exertion experiences in our videos. Not always for 30 minutes, although they can come back and do them again. But we're integrating that into most of our exercises or exercise videos each week. So, and I think we can see the difference, how people respond on through our videos, and we've received many comments about how good people feel when they've been challenged like that. So I think, just from that alone, I think that makes it makes a difference for people, and they feel better. So it's a good way to.
That is certainly my experience at the feedback. And also the other thing that is really, really, really important is as follows. It is a disease for which one can have apathy. And if one has apathy, one needs to get medical help. Exercise does help apathy, but it is a disease that one needs help. Probably some form of cognitive behavior therapy. It is a disease where one can have a little bit of anxiety and depression, and exercise helps, but one may be too anxious and depressed to even start, and so one may need to get help. Because of those factors, and because sometimes one doesn't have a good night's sleep, it may be that on some days you're just not feeling it, and that's perfectly fine. The bottom line is you listen to your body. There is no, certainly not from me, there's no strong, one must do this 4 times a week. It has to be this way or you get no benefit. Speaking to a very distinguished scientist with Parkinson's disease from upstate New York, and on days when she's just not having one of her best days, she may just do a little bit of gentle yoga, a little bit of gentle stretching, a little bit of Pilates. And then on the days when she's having a good day, that's when she'll get her high intensity workout in. And so the most important thing here is that you listen to your body. Just like it's not wise to do nothing, it's also not wise to fight an uphill battle. And if you're just not having a particularly good day, then that's fine. I know I've got several friends with Parkinson's disease, the AAA personalities that I run into, who find this hard to deal with, but rest is good.
Yes, yes. Well, all of this has been very inspiring, and I don't know if do we have any other questions? Okay. And I think, let's see, we had one other question, which I think I can answer here, is that if there's hope this is Nada from Croatia, if there's any hope to find a drug or cure for Parkinson's. And I think there is a lot of hope, but there currently is not a cure, but exercise, I think we both believe, is probably the best thing you can do for yourself to manage your disease, manage the disease.
Yes. So the lady's name was Nada from Croatia.
Yes.
Oh, I just think it's great that we have people coming in from Croatia. It's a wonderful part of the world. I think there are, in America alone, more than 30 drug studies going on. There's an immense amount of time and effort going into research. And so I think the most important thing to do is to have a cautious level of optimism. And one absolutely should have a cautious level of optimism. It is also the case that the cure is not going to come in the next few months for sure. This is a formidably complicated disease, and it is going to take quite a while to get everything worked out. The other thing that's very important for people to know, there's not just one Parkinson's disease.
Yeah.
There are various genetic variants, and they may come out with a cure or a treatment that works for one, but doesn't necessarily work for all. So I think, Nadia, you should be cautiously optimistic. But in the meantime, and I think the next thing I tell you is very important, okay? In the meantime, do everything you can for yourself, because one thing is clear. If the cure came out tomorrow, you would still have to be exercising, because you may get another disease, or you may just want to counteract the idea that we're all getting older. So a healthy lifestyle is really important for those of us who are really healthy. So the exercise message for me is quite independent of the cure, for which I am cautiously optimistic. But when the cure comes, you still want to be in the best shape you can be, because unfortunately, getting one disease doesn't make you immune to other diseases. And the reason the exercise is so good for one is you can go across all of your systems, and it's good for all of the systems, not just that very small part of the brain which has a dopamine deficiency.
Yeah. Well, that is a good plug. And I think that, hopefully we got the word across, and I'm so grateful to you for all the incredible work that you've done to just help confirm how important it is for someone with Parkinson's to exercise. And without that, I think, I've seen in the last 10 years how the programming for Parkinson's has changed and become more accessible. And I hope that it keeps becoming more and more successful as we focus more on Parkinson's symptoms. And, that it's just changed. We've seen a tremendous growth with our program, and we've seen people improve in such dramatic ways. So we couldn't do it without the research. That's critical to changing the way people look at their condition, really. So I hope that everyone, gained something out of this today. I know I did. And this interview will be on YouTube afterwards to share. And I'm so grateful that you were on today. And do you have any last parting words, Daniel?
First of all, Nina, thank you so much for inviting me. It is really a privilege to be able to talk to people around the world, including Croatia. So that's just terrific. And also to be able to talk to New Jersey is great. I just wish everybody who listens to this the best of health, and try whatever mind games you can do to keep yourself adapting to a healthy lifestyle.
All right. Well, thanks so much. And thanks everybody for joining us today. And starting in April is Parkinson's Awareness Month, and we have a full schedule of activities. So lots going on, and we hope we see everybody back on the channel. And thank you so much, Daniel, for joining us today. That was fantastic. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.